So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today we're going to be answering Ask HR questions because I'm banned. This is part of a long-running series where I answer 3 Ask HR questions from the Ask HR subreddit on Reddit. I find them to be interesting illustrations of what goes on in the workplace in the United States today. I will compare it to labor law, talk through how people should tackle these questions, and go from there. First question up is out of Texas, and it says forced to resign during probationary period due to budget cuts. This person worked 3 months at a state agency, which I find to be quite curious. State agencies are typically very rigid in their practice of HR. This person was in the probationary period of 6 months, asked to go into a meeting at the end of the workday where the supervisor in HR told them that it would be a reduction in force. Since they're a new hire, her and another employee have to be dismissed, but they said it would be considered a resignation, not a termination, and that she asked for written documentation and was ultimately asked to sign a pre-written resignation letter, which she did. Does it sound appropriate that she was asked to resign? Was she be able to apply for unemployment since she technically resigned? Why would a state entity go through the effort of hiring just to dismiss? This is really unprofessional. I think this is fairly common, meaning asking people to resign rather than firing. But I find it to be extremely unprofessional. In a situation like this, never resign. Just straight up, never. There's no point to it. They're going to fire you anyway. And why would you sign a pre-written resignation letter, seeing as that's not your true thoughts or feeling, right? You're not wanting to resign. It will be more difficult to apply for unemployment, I suppose. Because she signed a resignation letter. So the as a result, she's resigned rather than being laid off and receiving unemployment, which is why you wouldn't do that. Never resign. The only carrot that I can see that the state agency might have is that, hey, you might be rehired if you resign rather than lay off because then you'll be in good standing and it's a government position. So, that's a lot of jobs that you could be eliminated from if you were terminated. But if it's a layoff, that wouldn't be held against you anyway. So I'm not sure how that would be relevant still. So, don't sign these things. I've seen this way too many times, but it's just completely, unprofessional in my book, and it's a means of saving money. Out of Michigan, my manager revoked his consent for me to record meetings. Let me stop right there. Don't ask your manager to record meetings. That's a terrible idea. Manager's extremely untruthful and unorganized, blames others. I've documented our convos via email, and he would respond back to anything he deemed unfavorable to him as untruthful. Sounds like you have a really bad relationship with him. As it is, I would recommend leaving. But regardless, they got permission in writing to record the meetings via company communication tools, and his manager, and she was fine with it. He agreed with it. It didn't work. It didn't work out in his favor, allegedly. Then he, quote, revoked his consent out of the blue. Also claimed it's illegal. Went to HR and said there's a policy that says if he doesn't like it, I have to stop. Yep. Said nothing I did was illegal, as him staying on the meeting and me having it in writing was his consent. However, I now have to make him stop. Yep. Okay. Shouldn't it be a red flag to HR and his manager that he suddenly didn't want the meetings recorded? Or am I only viewing this from my standpoint? Yeah, you're only viewing it from your standpoint. I wouldn't consent to any meetings recorded, not because I'm being untruthful or anything of that nature. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. You don't know where a tape might go, how it might be edited. You don't know, once it's out, it's out. I would feel very uncomfortable with someone who didn't believe in me. That said, you have no reason to believe in him. So ultimately, what the path forward is to move on, move out. You just have a really bad manager, and unless you can find a good one soon, there's not much that's going to change about that. Which is it's tough, right? Whether or not it's illegal is totally up to the state. Michigan, I believe, is a one-party consent, meaning it's not illegal to record, but of course that is dependent on state and so forth. And there are a lot of state-specific laws on that. Next question is out of Texas. It says, when is it okay to skip steps in the disciplinary process? This person's been working in HR for a couple of years. disciplinary processes, coaching, verbal, written, final, and termination. They have 6 managers, so it sounds very small. Um, and they're very, quote, very handed with the write-ups, meaning that anytime someone does something that they would say corrective action is needed for, they give them a final warning or outright release them. Caught someone sleeping on the job and the manager wanted to outright fire them. Caught 2 people being unprofessional in the hallway, hugging and kissing. How do you gauge when it is okay to skip steps? And this is for the sleeping, I would say written. It really depends on the nature of the sleeping. It's one thing to sort of doze accidentally in a meeting. It's another thing to curl up, out by the heater, kind of like in the office, right? And so that's totally different. But there are some instances, and in many companies, sleeping is automatic termination. So it really depends. And they're not being particularly heavy handed. I would say that they are being particularly heavy handed with being unprofessional in the hallway, depending on the nature. I mean, I suppose if that was between a subordinate and a manager, that would be a problem. And, obviously that would be a problem. And perhaps that is when you final written warning or termination. But skipping steps is just it's completely dependent on the organization and the culture that you have going on. And then the important thing is to create consistency. All your managers need to be following that same line across the board as best as they possibly can. And I find that that's be the problem. If this person is the HR leader at the company, they are the person that's responsible for driving that standard, whatever the standard looks like. And so they have a significant amount of discretion in what actually this looks like. Well, let me know what you think. What would you do? How would you write someone up who was sleeping in the office? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.